Well, good morning, church, and thank you for being here for worship today, whether you're actually in the building or you're joining online. I would have loved to have been there in person myself, but unfortunately I can't be due to a family funeral that's happening out of province. And especially on this silver anniversary of the church's move to Fort Whitaker Road and the completion of our current church building. Just know that I am there in spirit with you and trust that God will use this special time of worship to remind us as a church family that any time that God's people respond in faith to his revealed will for us, either individually or collectively as a local church, that's when even things that seem impossible can become possible, and God can use it to generate a level of faith among an entire generation that they probably didn't know they had in them. On the last Sunday of November, in 1997, 25 years ago, the first church service was held in the building. In speaking with Carol Newman this week, she told me that she remembered the push to be in before Christmas that year, and they were able to do it. And I wasn't here for that service myself. It would be actually 5 more years before Wendy and I landed in Rusagonis with our young family. And I'm sure that many of the rest of you who are here, like, or are listening in, that you weren't at church 25 years ago either, not that church anyway, but of course, others were. And so as part of our service today, we sat down to talk to a few of them, particularly those who are part of either the fundraising campaign or the building committee that were actually really the most active groups leading up to it. And in a few minutes, we're going to share some of those interviews with you. But as I was thinking about what it might have been like for a small country church like us and in those days to make the decision to leave their old historic home, as lovely as it was, but with limited space and limited parking and no room for expansion, and take on what was at that time a brand new $1 million new build project, half of which was mortgaged and ultimately paid off 15 years later. What it brought to mind for me was the biblical story of the Israelite people at one particularly critical moment leading to their relocation in a permanent home of their own in the promised land of Canaan in the Old Testament. And you know, it's interesting because in any generation, when God's people make a decision to follow him, even when following him means taking huge steps of faith, there are always moments along the way when he reminds us of his presence with us and his pleasure in what we're doing. And that's some of what was going on in this Bible story that I want to share with you today. It's found in chapter 3 of the Old Testament book of Joshua. And keep in mind that the people of Israel at this point were ready to do what God was calling them to do. They were God's people, and yet sometimes they were reluctant, but now they were ready. They'd been to the borderlands of this new territory that God wanted to give them before, but at that time they weren't ready. They didn't want to assume the risk, and so for an entire generation, 40 years, they lived as wanderers in the desert. But now they're ready, and they knew that it was going to be hard. They knew that there might be moments when they would still question the decision they were making. From a human perspective alone, like the odds were entirely against them. But because they also were convinced that God was with them, they were ready. And at one critical moment, this is what the Word of God says happened in Joshua 3. It says, "Early the next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites left Acacia Grove and arrived at the banks of the Jordan River, where they camped before crossing." And again, don't miss the significance of this, because to the Israelite people, the Jordan River, it was symbolic to them. It represented a clear transition place. On the one side of the river that they were on, that was what they knew. Like, they'd basically grown up on that side. They'd grown up in the desert at that point, and so they'd gotten used to it. They weren't necessarily always happy about it. It was a hard life, actually, but at least it was familiar, and for them, familiar meant safe. But what wasn't safe for them is whatever was waiting for them on the other side. And they'd heard good things. They were inspired at the notion that they'd be able to plant themselves and grow their own food and create intentional community and all those things. But they'd never been there. Like, they'd never actually been there. It was entirely new ground. And the riverbanks they were camped on represented the threshold. Like, do we cross or do we not? That was the moment they were at. And it was a moment that lasted 3 whole days. And then in verse 2 it says, 3 days later, the Israelite officers went through the camp, giving these special instructions to the people. When you see the Levitical priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, this sacred chest, by the way, that symbolized God's presence with them. Like when you see the priests on the move with it, move out from your positions and follow them. Since you've never traveled this way before, they will guide you. But stay about a half mile behind them, keeping a clear distance between you and the ark. Make sure you don't come any closer. And then Joshua told the people, go and get ready. Like, this is the moment that we've been talking about, we've been waiting for. Go get ready for what the Lord's going to do. Literally, he says, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. I kind of wonder if anybody slept that night, Fear and excitement are similar emotions, twin emotions, and whether it was one or the other, I'm sure it was on everybody's mind. And then in verse 6, we're told, in the morning, Joshua said to the priests, lift up the Ark of the Covenant and lead the people across the river. And so they started out and went ahead of the people. The Lord told Joshua, today I'll begin to make you a great leader in the eyes of the Israelites. They'll know that I'm with you just as I was with Moses. Give this command to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. When you reach the banks of the Jordan River, take a few steps into the river and stop. Stop there. Like, isn't that interesting? It's actually kind of odd. I love the odd passages in the Bible. It always makes me stop and think. Just take a few steps in. Why? Because, friends, listen, when it comes to responding to something big that God is calling you to do, the first few steps are often the most important. And I'm not saying that it can't happen another way, because I wouldn't want to suggest that there are limits on how God can act. But I will say that very often in the stories from the Holy Scriptures, God will wait until someone takes those first few steps of faith before he demonstrates the full measure of his presence and his power. Command the priests, take a few steps into the river and stop. So Joshua told the Israelites, listen, come and listen to what the Lord your God says. Today you'll know that the living God is among you. He'll surely drive out the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Jebusites ahead of you, all these peoples. Look, the Ark of the Covenant, which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the Jordan River. Now choose 12 men from each of the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe, so you're all represented. And the priests will carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth. And as soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of water, listen, will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. And so the people left their camps across the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. And to make it even more daunting, it says that it was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks, which would have also meant the waters were running fast. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. And then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Excuse me. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's Covenant stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by, and they waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. Now, it needs to be said that they hadn't fully occupied the land yet. That would come. It would come later, and it wouldn't come easy either. There was a lot of work that still needed to be done. But as all the people of Israel were standing on the Canaan side of the river, having walked across with the water standing in a wall on one side and a dry riverbed as far as they could see on the other, and as they looked back at the priests, standing there in the middle of the dry river, holding the Ark of the Covenant, which for them, again, it was the very throne of God. It was his personal presence to them. In that moment, they knew a few things for certain. First, what is impossible with people is always possible with God. He has no limitations. Second, God often waits until we take the first step of faith to show us the full measure of his presence and power. We've talked about that already. And third, and maybe most important for some of us here today, his promises never expire. Which means, listen, even if it takes us some time to set our courage, an entire generation of time for the Israelites, remember. When we finally make up our minds and make the commitment to truly follow him, he is at the ready and will provide a pathway that, to be quite honest, we maybe never even saw coming. That's what this Sunday is all about. 25 years ago, a tiny congregation of God's followers from this small, rural New Brunswick community, I think it was about 65 families, saw a need, had a vision, trusted God, and took those first few steps into the water, so to speak. And here we are today, an entire new generation of worshipers who are experiencing the results. That's what God can do with those who are willing to follow him into the unknown. And so with that in mind today, may the Lord bless us and inspire us to take similar steps in our own generation into what God is calling us to do next as his people. Once again, thank you for being here. God be with you as you continue to worship together.
I suspect that people were pretty excited, and we likely were ourselves coming in here.
Our memory's not that good, Brandon. That's 25 years ago.
Well, people were really excited about getting into the new building, right? But besides that, I'm just trying to think about what kind of stood out in that service. We should have videotaped all that, right?
Well, for me, it was a very special Sunday, no question about it. In fact, I was sort of pinching myself through the whole service. What seemed like in 1992 a pipe dream became a reality. Like we on budget, on time, and here we are in the brand new facility.
I know Lois and I thought it was good.
Well, I think they were pretty excited about it. I mean, it was just getting started that they were quite a lot of discontent. But I think then they were happy about it, I think.
Yeah. And I know, like with Lois and I, like our 3 kids was all young, and had a gym. That was a big thing, for them. And that's what we looked at it for, Yeah.
The church was full, packed. People were excited. I believe they were thankful for what had been accomplished. And I believe we all understood that we had a lot of work ahead of us.
Our church was really on fire for about 4 or 5 years at that time, during that period. And looking forward to an incredibly bright future and so on and so forth. It was amazing.
Man, that's pretty sad. I don't remember anything, really.
There was a lot of praying went on, and like Bob and John, they looked after the financial stuff. And we figured, well, let's try it. Because at the time, we figured if we was going to keep the young people and new families moving in, we'd have to get a better situation than what the old church was. Gymnasium was a big thing. The older people, we had to have it level for people in wheelchairs or just slow walkers.
We had no space for a children's ministry. I mean, and how lucky are we now? One of the aspects of the whole process was that my parents, for instance, Gilmer and Myrna, and Ivan and Madeline, and some of the stalwarts of the old church and its facility and whatever. I mean, it was like, well, there's no reason why we can't continue this in a new building.
Well, one thing I remember was one of the meetings we had when we made kind of the final decision was all the elderly people were like in unity in doing it. The old church basically had to go, and we need the new church, which I found a little bit almost surprising. There were gung ho for it. Like they had the vision.
Actually, saying older then, they were probably like our age, right, in their 60s. Yeah, I think it was more younger generation that had a harder time.
Everybody was, you know, it was unanimous for the whole number. I forget how many people they said were there, but you know, there was no bickering. Oh no, we can't do that, or we can't do this. It was unanimous, and that was quite the evening.
Yeah, I think that the whole thing got to be very exciting and got to be really positive. Like the fact that we found, or I guess it found us, 20 acres of land or whatever that we bought for $40,000 and then paid off surprisingly quickly, and then embarked on the total fundraising.
We had actually at this point acquired the property, and we had started the process looking for a contractor to do the job. Wanted to get 3 options. Wanted them to provide us with 3 options. One, to build a completely new facility on this site. The second was, because it was doable, we could have moved the old building up here. The other option was not moving the whole building, but moving the original rectangular building that was built back in the early 1830s. To move that up here, just that piece, and then add on from there. And we held a meeting at the church one evening. I remember this like it was yesterday. I could feel there was something happening during that meeting. And as we approached, and we talked about the pros and cons about each of the 3 options. And there were 2, Margaret West was one that stood up and spoke about what needed doing. She said, I think the time has come to put some, to move on to a new chapter with a new church, a completely new facility. That's interesting. And Ivan Alexander got up and had us and said a few words, and it was essentially the same. Moved. I don't remember who moved it. I don't remember who seconded it, but that's presumably in the minutes somewhere. And boom, we walked out of that meeting with a decision, a firm decision on the part of this church to build a new facility that we're in now. The moving of the Holy Spirit during that evening, at the end of that meeting, to bring about that vote, I was walking out of that room on about a foot off the floor. I couldn't believe. I mean, I said, Lord, you've orchestrated this in a way that I would never have believed possible.
Not really, not me.
No, I don't think I did.
I just figured that we all had faith and
We was gonna,
we was
Do
going to
it.
accomplish it, yeah.
we was going to do it.
See, the big thing down there, I think it was Kevin Harris, he was with the DOT. They wouldn't let you build on it because the limits of the road was almost to the doorstep. So you couldn't do anything there. And then to move it, the weight restriction on this concrete bridge, the deal said no way, it couldn't be transported across. So we was hemmed into only one choice.
Really, personally, I kind of thought we went ahead with it and going with it. I just felt like it was the right thing to do, and I felt that people that had decided that, especially like I said, when the older people had all kind of chided into, this is what we're going to do, I thought it just seemed like it was going to be the right thing.
Right, and it was all part of that little logo, building to share or something. People really bought into it. People were really, ready for this. I don't remember there being any snags or at any moment that people didn't think this was the right thing to do. And I think I'm sure there were hiccups, but I think things went so well that it was part of God's plan.
We think, oh, mortgage, $500,000. But everybody responded favorably. And it was accomplished in less time than what we expected. So we have a lot to be thankful for.
Now the fat's in the fire, because now we're facing the prospect of $500,000 to more dollars worth of new facility. And we didn't have any money. We only had a pittance of money at that point. Lord, you're leading us in the right direction, but at least we feel that very much so. But okay, you're going to have to help us here, because I don't know how we're going to find those kinds of resources.
It wasn't prophetic, but it had been suggested that our community of Rusagonis was going to double in size, and it had not doubled in size for a long, long time. But if it doubled in size, what were we going to be able to do to captivate that and to take advantage of that from a growing of the church work? John and Gordon and I went down and spoke to the what do you call it? Foundation, and made the presentation down there. And they told us that the $500,000 mortgage that they approved for us was the largest mortgage that they had ever approved for such a small congregation. And as a banker, like that even scared me more, you know. But nonetheless, we went down, made the presentation, and come back. And when we got back, we got the phone call that it had been approved. And so, yeah, those are pretty exciting, but yet frightening times.
We did a 24-hour prayer vigil here in the church, which that weekend that wound up. It started on Friday and ended on Saturday night, and it was that Saturday that Bob and myself and Gordon went down to Moncton to pitch our request for this huge mortgage. And so the church was here praying up a storm during the whole time we were down there. But when we got back, in about 20 minutes after we got back, a phone call came in, and thumbs up. And well, that just rekindled the prayers going on the rest of the day.
Well, it was definitely a leap of faith. It really was, to step out and to kind of raise that amount of money, right? But personally, it's been a long time, but I don't remember at any point thinking, man, I don't think we should have done this. Like, I don't remember those, even amongst like the building committee, I don't remember those kinds of feelings. And
Well, I mean, people did, they gave, above and beyond, but I don't think anybody suffered anyway for it. I mean, it was exciting to see we had the chart showing the amount going up. Like it was pretty exciting to see, because it was really climbing, and to see that money coming in.
and that was encouraging to people to see that it was
Yeah.
climbing and stuff, right?
The congregation, they just dug down in their pocket, I think. Not equal giving, but equal sacrifice, something along those lines.
I was one of the two people that was privy to what the results were from the giving. People, pledging so much for over a period of 3 years. And I remember some of the testimonies, people saying, well, if we stop having if we give up Tim Hortons coffee, or we give up potato chips on watching TV at night, we can we can say, we can contribute this much. This is what it adds. It's amazing when you start adding up Tim Hortons coffee, how much money that goes down the gullet in the course of 6 months. It's staggering.
I think that once we did our project and did our program and come up with the commitment that we were going to do this, that people bought in. They bought into it, and it was really gratifying, but also surprising how funds flowed, and how donations came in, and how resources then became available.
there's a fair amount of outfits, you know, donated a lot of time and materials, and that helped too.
But I just remember that there were a lot of people who gave generously to specific things, and you know, buying the pews, for instance, you know, and you know, the flooring and just things that people don't necessarily think of.
I don't want to overlook the fact that Gordon, when he was our pastor at the time, he said, why don't we sell the parsonage? And he said, in fact, he said, we can get it appraised. And he said, I'm prepared to buy the parsonage. And that money will go into the, you know, and I forget how much money that brought in, but it wasn't insignificant to say the least. So that was one of the, that helped dramatically.
It was a big, elaborate, expensive project. But we were blessed with a good contractor and people that were really tuned in, to motivated to follow it through and make sure that it worked. Those were likely the most exciting times of this church membership in the 40 years that we've been here.
What we have today in this facility, where seniors have their mobile compromised, it's not an issue for them. The gym we've got that huge facility. We've got the foyer, everything's on one level.
Oh, I think there were some situations everybody was working hard at it and a lot of doubt, but it just seemed to fall into place. And I know with Lois, like she said, everybody was praying hard, and I was too. But I think that all helped. Yeah. And
Yeah, I think some of the people probably wondered if we bit off more than we could chew, but everything seemed to go along, and
yeah.
we did it.
Believe in the Lord, basically. Put faith that way. Yeah.
He was with us all the way,
Oh yeah. He was.
because we couldn't have done it on our own. But the people they all seemed to come together, and
Everybody worked together.
Do you know what it did do? Created quite a community though, because there was a lot of.
Yes.
We were on the fundraising committee. That was or promotion, I guess is what we were. Just even the sort of dinners that we had that were part of the fundraising program. I
Yeah,
guess.
there was a lot of kind of communities like in the.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, this kind of things bring people together. They certainly do. Yeah, we wouldn't do it again, but we wouldn't be on the promotion. That was for sure. That was oh my goodness, putting out all those brochures and yeah,
It was a lot of
it was a
work,
lot
but
of
it was
fun.
a lot
but it
of
was
fun.
Yeah.
Anybody you talked to thought it was great, you know. And even people that weren't members of this church, when after the build got up so they could see what it looked like, you had a lot of positive. Especially with me working around the community and elsewhere, you know, they said, boy, it looks nice. So
I always felt that I believed it was God's plan, and I felt that the people bought, I guess we'll say bought into it and gave way beyond what they, in a sense could, I think, in a lot of cases. And I think everybody was blessed through it. I can't remember, what we increased that head to what we did increase in giving too, but we thought about it, prayed about it, and just went for it. And never kind of looked back, really.
No. Isn't it? It's trusting it was God's plan, and it was, and just put it in His hands, right, and it worked out.
If the church isn't purposefully looking for ways to better serve the community, the immediate community, then it's losing its way.
We have often said that doing the mission tours that we've done has changed our life completely, okay? But if we were honest and backed it up, the sharing to build and the building to share, and financially committing, and then seeing that we were able to meet the commitments that we made, and to continue on. We have continued to give to the church and to numerous charities and Christian organizations since that time. But all of that, I think, was motivated by the experience that we had with the sharing to build. Like, give, and there will be enough left over.
Just have faith and God will provide.
You make that commitment. You know, you tell people what you're going to do. You tell the Lord what you're going to do. And He's going to see that you're able to do it. And I think that's the faith lesson that I would have from that whole thing.
I can't believe it's been 20, is it 25 years? Oh my goodness, wow.
Yeah. That's crazy. We must be getting old.
You are?